Well, it's going to be sunny today, so you can see it popping out. It's weird, there's the Columbia River, and it's, it flows outward, and you can see it in the distance really just like gushing outward. It's low tide, and the tide comes in enough from the ocean that it affects it up here that you wouldn't imagine that this is low tide, and then you look out and it's low tide, it's mud. This was all filled with water last night. But in the distance you can see the clouds are lifting. July 4th, 2022. My 20th anniversary with my husband.
Oh no, not so early in the morning.
At least you got your teeth in. Yeah, the sun's coming out over there. And over there in the pools, you can see there's a whole bunch of geese. And they're just picking, swimming and picking, swimming and they're pulling up something. And there's more there. And if you look real close, you'll see a heron standing right there. Big tall one. He's walking. There he is. He's walking away, walking along. This is awesome.
When you said blue beer, what's blue beer? Blue beer. Blue beer.
The middle of their building collapsed in on itself. There wasn't anybody in there. Nobody was hurt. They had closed for the day, but it collapsed. So our trestle goes right in front of there.
It was built over the edge of the river on wooden pilings. They even had wooden streets and everything, sidewalks. Unfortunately, that's very susceptible to fire. And in 1883, the city burned. They rebuilt it. And then in 1922, they had a devastating fire that destroyed over 30 square blocks of the downtown. And instead of rebuilding on wooden pilings over the river, they decided we should build on solid ground. So they built a seawall right at the edge, right into the edge of the river. And then they dredged the shipping channel, which is immediately to our left, and put the tailings from that dredging operation behind the seawall to create the flat ground that they then infilled to create before they started rebuilding the downtown in 1923. So unfortunately, this is as far as we can go in this direction today. The yellow building up in front of us, that's Buoy Beer. That's the brewery that collapsed about 2.5, almost 3 weeks ago. And tomorrow it'll be 3 weeks since Buoy collapsed. And so they've got the tracks barricaded, and this is as far as we can go this direction. So, you went off? Yep. Okay. Back here.
It's interesting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. We'll see you on the way back.
Okay, we'll be back here.
Hopefully. Thank you.
You bet.
Hop out the aisle here.
All that old wood.
Yeah. Yeah, straight ahead, that's the brewery. It collapsed, like he was saying, and the train runs right in front of it, and they've asked them not to bring the train by it because of the rumbling. It could cause more damage temporarily. So that whole ride was all there is today, but we'll take it later on the way back because that's how we got here.
When Mount St. Helens blew up, a lot of the ash blew this way and blew over the river and clogged the shipping channel. And there were ships, inbound and outbound both, that were stuck. They couldn't get through because the river had become too shallow. So they brought dredgers in here and dredged up all of that ash and volcanic material from Mount St. Helens blowing up. And that's where they put it. That's called Rice Island. Prior to May of 1980, that island was about 100 feet long and about 10 feet high. Today, it is a mile long and 100 feet high. So that's all volcanic ash from Mount St. Helens. So you can go home and say you rode the trolley in Astoria and saw the top of Mount St. Helens right there. So I'll point to a couple of other things off on the right. You can see McDonald's over there. That's no big deal. And behind that is our post office with the red tile roof. And behind that, kind of an orange, kind of mustard colored building, that's the Clatsop County Courthouse, built in 1904. And then behind it, there's a little squatty gray building with a flat roof and some blacked out windows. From 1914 to 1976, that was the Clatsop County Jail. Today, that is the Oregon Film Museum. There have been a lot of films made in and around Astoria. Some of them you may recognize include Short Circuit, Free Willy, The Ring 2, Kindergarten Cop, The Goonies. The Goonies is probably one of the more popular ones. The opening scene of The Goonies was filmed in that building, where one of the Fratelli brothers breaks out of jail and they hop in the car and set the parking lot on fire. And that's where that scene was filmed. And you can go in there today and tour it and see the jail cell that he escaped out of. They've got a bunch of movie paraphernalia there. They've also got a couple of green screens. You can make your own home movie in there. They've got the cameras, the backgrounds. They've got costumes and props and scripts, anything you want to use to make your own little 5-minute movie that they will upload to your home computer as a souvenir for having visited the film museum. So it's a lot of fun for the kids. Okay, we are going to head back the other way, and to do that, Bob and I are going to trade places. We always drive the trolley from the front, And the front is whatever direction we're headed. The river at this end was by ferry service, and the ferries operated from 1921 to 1966. And one of the early ferries was the Tourist 2, and this is the Tourist 2 right here on our right. That's for sale. You can pick that up today for a mere $199,000. I'm sure it would look great in your driveway, impress your neighbors. You can take it out to the lake on the weekends and have a good time. It was also the last operating ferry on the river. When it closed in August of 1966, that was the one that was operating. It's now owned by a private party, and his plan was to refurbish it and set it up for evening dinner cruises up and down the waterfront. Unfortunately, the thing needs a lot of work. It's a wooden boat, and the Coast Guard would not give him a permit allowing him to take on paying passengers without repairs being made. That turned out to be way more expensive than he was prepared to invest. So now it's for sale. So where this sits with these pilings here used to be what's called the Cannery. It's a salmon cannery that burned. And a lot of what looks like rocks down here, some of the odd shaped ones, that's actually melted tin. They used to make their own tin cans for the salmon, and they had large rolls of sheeted tin, and when the fire burned the cannery down, that tin melted into these globs down into the water, and that's what you see right there. These white buildings on the right, that's a commercial fueling station for the working boats on the river, the commercial fishing boats, the tugboats, the pilot boats, those kinds of things. And this gray building immediately to our right, that's Fish Hawk Fisheries. They process fish off the boats every single day, sell them to local restaurants and stores. This brick building to our right was built in the 1800s, intended to be used as a bonded warehouse. And it's made of brick that goes all the way to the riverbed. That was to prevent boats from pulling up underneath it at low tide in the night, drilling through the wooden floors and stealing stuff out of it. Today, that is being converted into a vodka distillery. Bob and I were fortunate enough to get a little tour of the vodka distillery about 3 years ago, but we have yet to see a drop of vodka come out of it. And we are getting mighty thirsty. So on our right here, these are the Columbia House condominiums. They were built in the 1970s. And unfortunately, about the time that the developer went to sell the units, the economy was in the tank and interest rates were pushing 20%, and he had a hard time getting rid of them. Ended up auctioning some of them off for as little as $25,000. Today there's a waiting list to get in there, and they start at about $400,000. So the bridge, this is the Astoria Bridge. It is 4.2 miles long. It was completed in 1966 at a cost of $24 million. They just completed a repainting of that a couple of years ago, and just to repaint the whole thing was $36 million. So it's when they built it, they put a $1.50 toll per car on the bridge with the promise that once the bonds were paid off, they would remove the toll. Well, many of the locals thought that would never happen because it's essentially a bridge to nowhere. There is no community immediately across the bridge. You have to drive several miles either direction to get to anywhere. But the bridge proved popular enough that it paid for itself in 27 years. So in 1993, they removed the tolls and it's now a free drive. You can see where this little superstructure is against the state of Washington over there. That's where the Oregon-Washington state line is. When Washington became a state in 1889, they made the natural channel of the river the state dividing line. And at this end of the river, it's right up against the Washington shoreline. Now this little concrete structure to our right, that was the soldering room in the Elmore Cannery that used to sit here. They had to solder those cans together to put the fish in, and they used an open flame for that. And so to protect the rest of the wooden building soaked in fish oil from the open flame, they did the work in that little protected concrete area. Well, when the building eventually did burn down, the soldering room remained standing and functioned exactly the way it was designed to do. Now these warehouses we're passing by used to be full of canned Alaskan salmon. We ship about 72 million cans of salmon out of here every year. Well, they moved their operations farther north up to the Seattle area, and now this is the home of Fort George Brewery, where they brew the Fort George beer in there. So you can get a pretty close-up view of the bridge. It's about 200 feet from the water up to the car deck. It was built high enough to allow a U.S. aircraft carrier to pass underneath, which has happened a couple of times. Even the battleship USS Missouri passed through here several years ago. One of the big tourist attractions here in Astoria is our very own sandy beach. It's very popular, and this is it right here on your right, Astoria Sandy Beach. And because it's low tide, it's even bigger today than it normally is. So on a nice day, you want to get here early to get a good spot. Coming up on our right is something called the Maritime Memorial, and this has the names of people inscribed on the granite who passed away, but their lives were dedicated to the water in some way, either in the fishing industry, the canning industry, the Coast Guard, and when they pass away, they're eligible to have their names etched on this memorial. And they have a couple of very nice ceremonies every year where they read all of those names off of the memorial. Now on your right, you'll see a building that says Cannery, Pier, Hotel and Spa. That is the Cannery, Pier, Hotel and Spa. It's built to look just like the Union Fishermen's Cooperative Cannery that sat there 100 years ago, right down to the fake smokestacks on the west end. Every room in there has a water view. Now this building we're passing by right now that houses the Bridgewater Bistro, one of the best restaurants in town. This was the old machine shop and warehouse that serviced that cannery back in the days when it was operating. But they've refurbished it, still got the original hardwood plank floors inside there that are absolutely beautiful. So coming up on our right is the west end mooring basin. If we were able to go all the way to our full route, you would see a mooring basin at the east end as well. We're kind of bookended by the two mooring basins. I mentioned the movie Kindergarten Cop. That was filmed here, and there was a scene in the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger and Penelope Ann Miller are having dinner at a restaurant that used to be here. And it's at night, they're looking out over the harbor. It's very romantic. All the lights are on the fishing boats. Well, if you come down here tonight hoping to see a scene like that, you will likely be very disappointed. The producers of the movie paid every one of those boat owners $200 to turn their lights on just so they could film that scene. So a little Hollywood magic for you. Okay, this is as far as we go this direction. Appreciate you riding today. Enjoy the rest of your time in Astoria. All right, folks, here we go. Welcome aboard Astoria's historic riverfront trolley, Old 300. The trolley was built in 1913, so this is 109 years old. This is not a replica. We've had it on the tracks here for 23 years, making these runs, and it's operated entirely with volunteers. Your motorman up front is Bob. My name is Rob, so you got the Bob and Rob show. And we got about 33 certified motormen, and we all do this for free because we love the trolley, we love Astoria, we love talking about both of them. But if you're new to Astoria, one of the things you may not know is that Astoria is the oldest American community west of the Rocky Mountains. It was established as a fur trading post in 1811 by a man named John Jacob Astor, who himself never visited the place, but he sent two groups of men out here, one by sea around Cape Horn and the other one overland, following the same route that Lewis and Clark had just returned from 4 years earlier. The ship got here first in the spring of 1811. The first thing they did was build a fort for their protection and collect the furs. And they named it Fort Astoria in honor of their benefactor, Mr. Astor. And his dream was to have a fleet of ships continuously circumnavigating the globe, loading up the furs here in Astoria, sailing them across the Pacific to China, where he trade for silk and tea and other goods, and then on to Europe and New York and come back to Astoria. Well, unfortunately, that dream never worked itself out. The reason was the War of 1812. Believe it or not, Astoria was on the map and the British wanted it. So during the War of 1812, they sent a warship across the bar in 1813 with the intent of capturing and destroying Fort Astoria. They were able to take it over without firing a shot. And the reason for that was that the Canadian fur trappers that Mr. Astor had hired were loyal to the crown, and during a time of war, they sold his assets out from under him and they renamed it Fort George. And it remained Fort George for the next 33 years. It wasn't until the Oregon Territory Treaty of 1846, which, among other things, created the permanent boundary between the United States and Canada, that the name of Astoria was restored. Well, the next big thing they discovered was that the Columbia River had the richest runs of salmon anywhere in the world. So they started catching salmon, and to preserve them so they could be shipped long distances, they started building salmon canneries. And these old pilings that you see here out in the water, those are remnants from those old 1800s canneries. At one time there were over 50 canneries on the lower Columbia, about 30 on the Oregon side and about 20 on the Washington side. But eventually even the mighty runs of salmon were depleted to the point that they were no longer economically viable, and all of the canneries went out of business. And they were either torn down or they burned down, and all that's left is these pilings. And you may wonder, why don't they pull those things out of the water? They're rather unsightly. Well, the reason is that's considered private property. Somebody owns those things. And if they were to remove them, the land underneath would revert to the ownership of the state of Oregon. And the second reason is that if they were to remove them, there could be some environmental impact that would be very negative and very expensive to mitigate, so they just leave them where they are. And the third reason is, believe it or not, those things can be built on top of again. Now, it doesn't look like that would be a really good idea given the condition they're in right now, but believe it or not, below the low water mark where they have not been routinely exposed to air, the wood in those pilings is as solid as the day they were driven into the riverbed 150 years ago. And if we could go further down upriver, we would see some newer buildings downtown that were built on top of these old cannery pilings. So, the canneries were a pretty strong economic driver here in Astoria for many decades. And this trestle that we're crossing now was at one time part of what was at that time the longest trestle system in the world. It was over 17.5 miles long from Ton Point in front of us out to the mouth of the river and into the ocean, where they began building the South Jetty in 1885. Now this rusted metal thing to our left here, that's an old ship's boiler out of a steamship that ran aground at the mouth of the river near around 1900. The boiler was salvaged out of the ship and put to work in the old White Star Van Camp Cannery that sat here until it burned down in 1956. Now these rocks you see just off in the water here to our left, we call those our international rocks. That's because they're from all over the world. Back in the 1800s, in the day of the tall sailing ships, they had to carry some weight in their holds to be able to sail across the ocean for stability, and then they'd get into port and they'd just throw those rocks overboard where they would fill up with cargo, which would then provide the ballast they needed. And so those rocks, they've tested them and they're from all over the world.
It's the garden of surging waves. And it tells you points of history of the city. My mother graduated with a college degree. Oh, it has to do with China. It has to do with China. That's why the gate is like Oriental Gate. So it must be about the immigrants. It talks about their accomplishments since they've been here and how they came. And they have names inscribed in stained glass. And a pagoda. Open space for gathering and maybe dancing. And then they have scrolls. And it's all about educating. Anybody wants some panties? Good Lord, Francine. cool. Little lantern over there. Or it could be a giant incense burner. This is in Astoria, Oregon. This is looking up from underneath the glass bricks that you see in a sidewalk. And this is what they're for. They're windows for light. And you come down into a place that's underground. Like this. You see them in a lot of places. Boston has a lot, Seattle, Portland, they all have them. When we got downtown and there was no one here about an hour ago. We parked right away on like the main street. In and out of some of the shops. Most of them are closed today. But it's getting really crowded with the traffic. And a lot of people here with kids. 4th of July stuff going on. Astoria, Oregon. I really like it here. Peter likes it too. Very quirky. A lot of history. I've never seen a town with so many buildings that have glass brick. The fire was in 1922. There was a fire that burnt most of downtown down, and it was rebuilt in 1923. And from then, and at that point, there were a lot of buildings that were built with glass brick in a new style. You know? So it's pretty cool. And they have the video I just took of the glass in the sidewalks. Like I said, a lot of places have that. Very cool. Oregon. Cute little town with the lighthouse in the middle of it. Earhart, Oregon. Heading to the city center. Decked out. Quebec. I do believe we're at the Pacific Ocean. nature. I don't know whether I should frolic or prance. Maybe wince. We're in Elkhart, Oregon. We just parked the car right over here at the end of the main street. When you get out of the car, you cross it over, and you get this huge field and all this, the dunes and the grasslands. And then beyond that would be a sandy beach. Elkhart is a home of elk, where elk may be your neighbor. All over the road, we took pictures of elk, because I guess they're abundant around here. Grass grazing. This is Elkhart, Oregon. These mountains are so fucking beautiful. Jesus. Once we get over this hill, it's the ocean. Here we go. Crowd down there. 4th of July party of some sort. That's fine for me over here. The seaside is that way a little bit further. Actually, it's probably right down there, straight ahead, where the shore curves. Pretty sure that's seaside. tide has returned. It's back in. It's the afternoon now on July 4th. Comes in, it goes out. It's the only drawback here is the constant noise of that refrigeration of the cannery next door. If we're on the other side of the building, you can't hear it at all. Next time. Just like last time we were over there. Next time.
Got rid of the queens of the
The big boat. They don't like fireworks. Yeah, I know. I don't like them either. God, I feel like Tippy Hedron. Should probably go somewhere. It's gonna be bird shit city in a second. We're in Astoria, and the fireworks are about to begin on July 4th, 2022. And someone just blew off some big loud ones, and the seagulls are having a bird, literally taking a henny. You'll have to look up Boston lingo for that. So July 4th, our anniversary, and we're in Astoria, Oregon. And we found a spot to sit on a pier. There's our motel. So we just walked over here. And then we continue. There's Astoria. I love it here. And then the bridge to Washington over there. There's the sunset right now. It's just setting. Not very cloudy. Way over there you can see some spectacular clouds, but it's like way up in Washington somewhere. Way in the behind there, there's some nice ones. But the fireworks are about to begin, and I believe they're being blown off from the barge that you see straight ahead in the middle of the Columbia River with the lights on. Right there, those boats, I think that's where they're coming from. So we'll have a nice shot of the fireworks right from sitting right here. You sit down. That was my backbone. It's not me farting either, it's the wooden bench. I don't fart. Never. So we'll come back when the fireworks begin, when they commence. There's one. Those look like private ones. Don't get caught. They ain't playing this year. They're illegal. My God, can you imagine if this place caught on fire? If they had a wildfire here? All with all those houses? Jesus. Some of them are so old, they'll just go right up. There's nothing over there. That's all.
Yeah, but last night somebody was sending some more.
Probably in their house, maybe. All those flashes that we saw, that was lightning.
I know that, but earlier,
Yeah.
sparkles and things that go up.
Yep, there we go.
No, come on.
Those are nice ones.
Yeah.
Coming in. It's getting dark out. Street lights are on. You better get home. Put on long pants in case you get invited somewhere nice. That's right. You might get invited out to go for ice cream down Kelly's Landing.
Who wants ice cream?
Who wants ice cream? Do you want yours dipped or do you want it with Jimmy's? Here we go, the battery's dying on this. My batteries or my charger or something, there's something about them that's just fucked up. And I keep going through batteries like 3 times a day. So, this is 4th of July in Astoria. And unless I walk home and get a battery, this is not going to be probably one of the last videos until I get home. There's the motel, the hills of Astoria, the bridge, and some fireworks. Boom.
Getting them right behind that thing.
Oh, the pillar.
Yeah.